I am going to put my slides up and make a start because we've got a fantastic topic tonight to share. And I hope that's clear and you can see that and that you can still see me as well. This is a webinar. I have run this as a workshop, a 3-hour workshop. And so for the webinar tonight, I've truncated it. And there are a number of activities in it that I am going to invite you to do after the webinar or in the next few days or over the weekend. Do you have note paper with you? That would be extremely helpful tonight. I do have some resources I can send tomorrow as well, but I'll give you a moment to get note paper so that you can just jot down a couple of things. So I've called tonight's presentation Navigating Midlife, a Wellbeing Path for the Second Half. I think tonight's webinar is really suitable for anyone within the range of about 40 to 65. So I hope you're somewhere in that range, and if you're not, that's okay as well. You'll see a lot of nature tonight. It's a very big part of my work. Most of the photographs are here on Wadawurrung country outside of Geelong. And then there are a few others that are in different places. So my name is Lisa Barker, for those who haven't met me before. I am the founder and principal facilitator at Heliotropia Wellbeing. And I have got my qualifications there just to remind people on the webinar that this is evidence-based research. I have been a teacher for a long time and then transitioned, went back to study. I guess had my own midlife experience of change and transition, went back to study and completed 2 postgraduate qualifications in positive psychology and a few other things. And I've gone back to study again, currently completing a graduate certificate in organisational coaching. So very much on my own journey of transition. I am an absolute lover of the outdoors, and nature is a very big part of my own well-being. I guess my recipe for well-being. This is a recent photo of me in Garryward, which is the Grampians, the Indigenous name for the Grampians. And I was on the way down from a very strenuous hike, but fully living life and I guess experiencing that transitional time myself and becoming very aware of what I need to transition well across this lifespan. Heliotropia, many of you know this, means turn towards the sun. It's a Greek word. And all elements of nature, including us, demonstrate the heliotropic effect, which is the behavioural good sense to turn towards what enhances our life and to turn away from what depletes us and detracts from life. And we do have to do this in order to survive, but if we do it enough, we can actually thrive in life. So I'd like to acknowledge country. I'm on Wadawurrung country. Found this painting recently by Edward Roper in 1872. I just see it as completely full of joy. It is a scene from Western Victoria. So not quite Wadawurrung country, but certainly Victorian Indigenous country. And I acknowledge all Indigenous people, all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders around our beautiful country, and pay my deep respects and thanks for their ongoing custodianship of the land, and for their incredible willingness to share with us, for those of us who are not Indigenous to Australia and the Torres Strait Islands, to share with us their ancient and enduring Indigenous wisdom. So where are we headed tonight? We are going to do a short intention setting. We're going to touch on what well-being is, and then we're going to jump into the midlife conundrum and move through a couple of stages there. The bulk of the work is going to be the work of Carol Ryff, and I'm aware that some people in the room may have attended a webinar last year with her work. So this will be a great refresher course for you. It is different, but it will be a good refresher course. And then I'm really going to invite you to consider what you need for your path and what you're willing to try. And if we have time, and I hope we do, we'll have a couple of questions, and then we will move out into the evening at 8 o'clock. So, intention setting. Well, we know, and the science tells us very clearly, that when we align our attention with our intention, then our energy flows to a very heliotropic place. We live in an incredibly fragmented world, even more so now in the last 18 months than perhaps we've experienced in the past. And so it's incredibly important to consider where we are placing our attention. I'd like to do a short grounding meditation on intention with you now. It'll take about 5 minutes, so get comfortable, feel very free to join in, and if you would just like to listen and not actively participate, then that is fine too. It's entirely up to you. So this is adapted. This is Theory U adapted work by Peter Senge, and it's really all about imagining our intention as a travelling partner in our lives. So when you're ready, let's just allow ourselves to be right where we are. And some deep breaths from Mother Earth through the soles of our feet up through our body can help just to ground us, to connect us to our country here. I just invite you to take some deep breaths at your own pace and feel that connection beneath your feet. And as we are here together, we can even imagine the connection between each of us. We are around Australia tonight. And I invite you to imagine the journey you've been on so far, because our lives are a journey. And if it helps to close your eyes, I wonder if you can imagine weaving its way alongside you is an underlying thread of intention. It's right there beside you. And I invite you to imagine it in any way that feels right for you. It might be a colour, it might be an object, it might be a metaphor, a word. So this intention has accompanied you, has been a very subtle part of you all along. This concept or this energy of attention. It's been your travelling partner. But I invite you to imagine that it doesn't actually come from you. Rather, it is the most direct and most important connection between you and the larger living world. So it's not derived by you, but instead it's always been there and will always be there as your connection to the larger system. And sometimes this thread of intention stays in the background and we just get on with life. And at other times, it will tug at our sleeve and demand we pay attention, calling us to contemplate and activate something in our lives. And at this midlife point, it's not uncommon for it to tug at our sleeve. And so we can ask ourselves, how in this moment in time on my journey might I embody and express this intention that has always been there and always been part of my life? And so I would invite you to consider later on, through thoughts or images, through writing or gestures or metaphors, see if you can begin to capture some of this thread of intention for you. And you can start with the most subtle, tiny little example of its presence. Or maybe you'll start with something that's very urgent and is demanding your attention. But I would certainly invite you to have a go at that. Okay, we are going to go on. Thank you for that, and I hope that you find that quite a heliotropic thing to do. So we've been on the road, and we can call it a halfway point at midlife, and we've spent a lot of time on this road constructing an identity. And we may have formed it very, very early in life, and then we've worked away at it. If you can imagine a block of marble, and we have chipped and chipped away and released or revealed our identity by the time we get to around this age. And this is a favourite tree of mine. It's up in the snowy mountains and near Kosciuszko. And we can imagine, I like to imagine, that the larger and more mature part of this tree is my identity that I've carefully constructed over many decades. And you can see that sapling growing out of the middle. That is me going forward. And it's just a metaphor that works for me. And I'd love you to consider that now is a time to consider, even though we have crafted and honed our identity, that we have an opportunity to step forward and begin to craft a new story. And we are all women tonight in the room. I was ready to change some of these slides if we had some men with us, because midlife is a process for men as well. But I'd love to invite you to see whether this question resonates for you. How can I, after being all things to all people, become the person I need to be for myself. And so I guess what we're asking here is, how can I consider a positive centeredness of self at this point in my life? It's not selfish. It is the opposite of selfish, especially if, like many women, we have been of service to many others throughout our lives. We were really socialized to do that. How can I now turn to my own deep intuitive needs? So here's an activity for you, and I'm going to just give you a minute to do this. So if you've got your paper ready, I've got mine here, I'm going to do it too. I invite you to just jot down in list form everything you've done in the last day or so. And I'm going to time us. And we are going to start now. Just everything you can think of, even the smallest things. Okay, we've got 10 seconds to go. And stop. Okay, I'm guessing you got a few things on your list. And I'm going to ask you now to code your list. So if something on your list was exhausting and or boring for you and didn't hold any great enjoyment, just pop a square next to it. So let's do that now. If something was really exciting and engaging, I'm going to invite you to put a triangle next to it. And some things might have more than one shape, by the way. So really, really engaging and just lit you up and gave you a lot of focus. If something was very loving and giving to someone else and actually was heliotropic in the sense that it was shining a light on someone else, a heart can go next to that. And finally, if you did something that was entirely for yourself, something that was a self-care or a self-compassionate activity that was just for you, I want you to put a big circle around it. And have a look at your list. And I would invite you to just put it to one side now. But the idea of this activity is to see how many circles you are actually creating in your life. And if there are not many there, this is something to consider. The circle is really, really important at this point in life, particularly if we've had a lot of squares, triangles, and hearts leading up to this point. The circle is super important. because midlife is a really unique phase of the journey, and many of us feel this tension, and it's a tension that pulls us between wanting things to stay the same and wanting things to continue, and also recognizing and knowing that we need to make some changes in some ways in our life. And so we are all on a path, and this is a big question, and not for you to try and do now in 1 minute, but something you might want to consider doing. What would you like to walk towards at this midpoint, and what are you happy to walk away from? And in a longer workshop, what I do with this question is I actually encourage people to divide a page and to have a walk towards side and a happy to walk away from side. And the idea here is just to start considering that constructed identity that we've worked so hard to construct, that big piece of marble that we've chipped away at and revealed our true identity, some of it perhaps is no longer important for us to hang on to. And some of it can be let go, and elements of it we might want to really grow and enhance. And love this quote. I really smiled when I found this quote. Even Dante, the Italian poet and philosopher, struggled. And he said, "Midway, this way of life we're bound upon, I woke up to find myself in a dark wood, where the right road was wholly lost and gone." And I don't know about you, but it's kind of comforting to know that someone as philosophical as Dante also struggled at this midpoint. And the right road can be very, very hard to find, and we might not even know yet exactly what it is. And for some, this midpoint is also really a sandwich. And I wonder if we have any people tonight in the room who can identify with this, the sandwich between our young adult offspring and our parents who possibly are needing us more, and then with work thrown into the middle of that. And this is a real tension. This sandwich may not be quite as delicious as that one on screen. The parental experience these days is really long. It's longer than it used to be. And the adult to child relationship morphs into an adult to adult relationship. And if it's all under the same roof, that can cause a tension in itself. And then, of course, for many of us, we have demanding jobs and are pulled in many, many directions. And so I wonder if we are starting to form our own ideas. And I know for some of you in the room tonight, you've been to a few of these webinars and do your own wellbeing work. If we are starting to form some ideas about what wellbeing means to us, to me personally, we know it's not a one size fits all, and there'll be things I say tonight that just don't resonate with you, and that's fine. That's totally fine. But we can start to create the beginnings of our own personal definition. And I find words and images are great for this. For me, and I've mentioned this before, the sea is very, very important for my personal well-being. And having the opportunity to be in nature and to be able to move my body in the water is very important for me. It's big. And there may be big things for you as well. And if you haven't done this already, I would invite you to start to make some kind of creative representation of what is important for you. And we can look at Felicia Huppert's definition, which is just such a great definition. She's an Australian researcher. But she does put it very simply. Wellbeing is most simply described our ability to feel good and function well and have the resources to do this each day. And the most important part of this definition for me is the last sentence, to have the resources to do this. Because we can try to initiate all kinds of wellbeing interventions, but if we don't actually have some of those basic foundational building blocks of having enough financial security to be able to not feel stressed, having a safe environment to live in, having a safe environment to work in, all of these, of course, have to come before any higher order well-being desires, because it will all crumble without those foundational things. And, you know, we know that we are complex, and we know that we're living in a very complex world. And at the moment, perhaps more complex than any of us have experienced before. And I'm reminded of the work of Laura King, who's at the University of Missouri, and is most well known for her work on best possible self, but she has a much wider remit than that and looks at a lot at meaning in life. And you know, she made a statement in a recent presentation that I thought was really spoke to me. She said, life is more meaningful, or life feels more meaningful when it makes sense, when the world makes sense. And perhaps we're not feeling that just at the moment. We're down here as the individual, and then we are embedded within layers and layers of other systems that impact upon us, and what we do impacts directly or indirectly on some of these layers too. But Laura King went on to say that we need to seriously consider that a meaningful life can also happen in times of great difficulty and chaos. And in fact, meaning is unconditional. And she's, of course, drawing on the work of Viktor Frankl there. And if we zoom right into our own system, you know, we are a whole combination of systems. And the biopsychosocial model is just an amazing way to remind ourselves of this. You know, nothing in our lives happens for one reason. It's everything that happens to us is a combination, an interconnected combination of our biology, our psychology, and the social context that we find ourselves in. So why is getting older framed as a problem in society? And I wonder if these are if you can identify with any of these assumptions. You may have thought them yourself, or said them, or heard them said. The assumption that any injuries that we get are due to getting older. That really it's all downhill from here. Once we reach this midpoint, that's kind of the pinnacle, and then it's all downhill. Have you ever said this or heard this said, I'm too old for this? Or this one, actually seeing someone, an older person, and I've put a woman there, I don't want to be like her in the future. Perhaps this one, I'm less valuable than I once was. I wish I looked and felt younger. Now, these are all deep assumptions, and they are societal. If you identify with any of these, you are not alone, and it's not entirely of your own making. This is that complex societal model that we looked at a couple of slides back impacting upon you. Menopause is a medical condition. that needs to be treated with pharmaceuticals. Now, for some, it may well be. For a small proportion of women, it may be. But it's a natural process that women have been passing through for thousands of generations. I don't feel I've achieved enough. I'm here at the midpoint and I haven't done what I wanted to do. I wonder if you felt that. Younger is better. So these are all deeply held assumptions. Sometimes we might not even realise they're there. But worrying about getting older and worrying about this next phase actually does age us. And that is the allostatic load at work. And if you can imagine these plastic caps on the end of the shoelaces, when we have more stress in our life than our biopsychosocial system can manage, then those little shoelace caps are a metaphor for our telomeres, which are the caps on the ends of our chromosomes. And stress just wears them away. And because those chromosomes contain our DNA, this is a premature aging process. We do need to really care about this, and it can change the genetic expression of our DNA. So let's move on to the 6 dimensions of psychological well-being. I hope so far that I've painted a picture for you to really shine a light on the fact that this is a unique transitional time in life, and to move through this with psychological resources is going to be a very smart idea. So this 6-dimension model is very well known. It was first developed in 1989. Carol Ryff is a very quiet achiever, but she has spent her entire life, she's in her 70s now, I believe, her entire adult life working on what are the elements that we require to continue to stay psychologically strong across the lifespan. And her specialisation now is this midlife time. So this research, the research she's done, it's cross-cultural, is really relevant to us at this point in our lives. And so this is an activity. Now, again, if we were in a workshop together and we had a lot of time, we would do this. I'm not going to get you to do it now. I'm just going to move a couple of things on my screen just so I can see what I'm doing. But I'm going to send this to you tomorrow. And it's really well, I called it the Midlife Ecosystem Wheel. And what I invite you to do tomorrow is to take the 6 psychological well-being dimensions and put them around these 6 portions, and then choose another 2, I beg your pardon, not 3, 2 things that you particularly care about. And there's a few ideas for you there, but you'll have your own ideas. And then if you feel like it, you can actually draw a line somewhere across the portion where you feel you are at this moment. So for example, and we're going to go through these 6 dimensions, but let's just take one from here. Stress management. If you feel that you are doing that really well, that you have a lot of strategies that you can activate in the moment when you need them, you might draw your line somewhere high across here, at a 9 or even a 10 right on the rim. If you feel that actually the stress that you're experiencing in your life at the moment is hard to manage and you don't actually have good resources for it, you're going to draw your line somewhere down here. And so I invite you to do this and have a look at it, and then start to consider what you might activate to start to move the line out towards the rim for particular portions, particular dimensions. So I'm going to go through these and just spend a few minutes on each. And really what I've put here is the work of Carol Ryff. Once we have this dimension working well for us, we are goal setting. They might be very small, little micro goals. They might be larger goals. But we are starting to make decisions about the direction that we'd like to head in. We do hold some beliefs and values that feel purposeful. We do understand that creating meaning is something that we do across the lifespan, right across the lifespan. And again, this can be in the smallest portions, little micro portions. Laura King's work shows us that creating meaning can be as micro as working on our mood, trying to create opportunities to be in a good mood. That can create meaning in our life. Creating meaning is not, it's very experiential. It's not having these big, enormous goals that perhaps are only reserved for people who work very hard and are particularly exceptional. Creating meaning is about experiencing everyday things that give us a sense of significance and coherence and purpose. So I might ask you, if you haven't considered this question already, do you have a significant yes for 2021? It might be something quite small. It might be something larger. But do you have something in mind? And if you don't, this is something to think about. And for many of us, our significant yes is there in the background, but around midlife, it does start to tug at our sleeve, as Peter Senge said so beautifully in his intention setting meditation. And we've often covered it up, though. The reason it's been in the background is that we've been so helpful to other people. Yes, I can help with that. Yes, I can help with that. People ask us and we say yes. Yes, I'm very used to being of service, and so I'll continue in that vein and I can help you. And when we do this, we start to cover up what really gives our lives something meaningful to work towards or to focus on in the future. And actually being able to say no at this point in our lives is incredibly important, not selfish. It's really about, if we shine that light out all the time, then we lose the light within us. We need to actually turn the beam of light around and shine it on us to see actually what is it that I need to bring to fruition in my own life. And so it's all about boundaries, isn't it? It's about being able to say no and being able to say it's not too late for me to take a step towards where I want to be headed, where I want to go. And, we see young women are really good at this. They're becoming very good at this. They are setting boundaries and they are defending them rigorously. And this is quite a new concept for me. No one ever talked to me about it, and I never really considered it until quite recently, that boundaries are not selfish. They actually allow me to move forward in the most heliotropic way for myself. So let's move on to positive relationships. Lots to say about this, but I will put these up incredibly important. We know that this is just the single most important element of well-being across our lifespan. Positive relationships are absolutely key to living well. And as much as possible, we need to be working on this second one, making sure that the relationships that we devote our time to are warm and trusting and satisfying. And that's not to say that we won't have relationships in our lives that are not these things. But at this point, and if we look at the research, particularly the research of Roy Baumeister and John Tierney, that if we consider 5 relationships and one of them is quite toxic and difficult, we need to have 4 other good ones to counterbalance this toxic one here. We do, one of the things about developing good relationships is caring about others. Other people matter, the beautiful work of Chris Peterson. But we also need to care about ourselves, as I've been saying a little earlier in the other slides. But of course, in our relationships with others, showing that we care is incredibly important, and we can do that through empathy, affection, intimacy. And we understand that relationships are reciprocal, and there needs to be a sharing, a reciprocity in them, or else they break down. If someone sucks all of the oxygen out of the room in a particular relationship, that relationship will crumble eventually. And this is a photograph that is very heliotropic to me. This is quite recently. I had a chance to go to South Australia and be reunited with my twin sister and a very, very favourite cousin. And it just, this photograph reminds me of this very big finding that has come out of the grant study, which has been going now for over 80 years. The single most important, the single most significant factor in developing well-being across the lifespan is the quality of our relationships. And at this stage of our lives, we actually might need to do some pruning. We may have relationships that are not creating well-being outcomes for them, and we may have given them our very best shot over decades, potentially. And it is okay to prune that garden if it's not actually allowing us to fully become our own authentic selves. This grant study, if you don't know much about it, I'd love to send you some information on it. It is just well worth having a look at. There's a wonderful TED Talk, a 12-minute TED Talk, that is well worth having a look at, that really outlines what the grant study has been able to show over 80 years. So we can also nurture our existing relationships. We can seek new relationships. That intergenerational piece is incredibly important with relationships. Having younger and older friends really adds a massive layer of value to our lives. I wrote a blog about this recently and it was very warmly received. And if you did not see it, you'll find it on my website. But there are multiple advantages in having different aged friendships across generations. This third factor here, I would put a caveat there on that one. Consider repairing a relationship that is currently fractured, but only if it is the right relationship for you and only if it feels like the right time. As I said, sometimes we need to prune, and we need to do that for a self-centered reason, and I mean that not selfish. I mean a reason that gives us a positive centeredness. And of course, look out for people who may be lonely. It really does take a village. We have the COVID pandemic, but we have a loneliness epidemic alongside it. And young people in particular, some of the research coming out now, young people in particular are are finding since the beginning of the pandemic, that their rates, the data on their loneliness is increasing, rising. So here's an activity for you. Again, if we had a lot of time, I'd get you to do this, but what I'd love you to do is consider doing this later on, or just make a start now on your note paper. I invite you to consider that you are embedded within an ecosystem. Of course you are, because you are an element of nature, and nature is itself a series of ecosystems. And if you were to see yourself at the center, let's take this beautiful ripple here. You might like to draw some concentric circles, rippling out, and just mark in people who are in your ecosystem of connection, who are there for you, who are providers of well-being for you. And they're not set in stone, just this is water and this is fluid. You know, people will move in and out of our lives, and sometimes we are physically separated from people, of course, and especially now. But we can create a little ecosystem of connection. And when we are feeling lonely, we can get it out and have a look and say, okay, where might I, if I ripple out today, who might I just touch base with to help me fulfill that positive relationship dimension that's so important for my well-being. And then, of course, there's this beautiful, the grandmother or great aunt effect. This is the scientific research. Even whales do this. When I read the research around that, I was kind of absolutely blown away. But the grandmother effect or the great aunt effect is really asking ourselves, where can we add value to the next generation? In what way can we be generative? Can we help grow and develop the next generation? How can I scaffold? How can I mentor? What would I like to pass on? What does my time with descendants or intergenerational family members, what quality value add will that give to my descendants? And these two women, this is my mother and my oldest daughter, and they're hardly ever together because they are separated by oceans. But when they are together, there is an incredible ancestor-descendant energy, and we all have this possibility in our lives to make an impact, whether we are blood related or not. You know, we have a family of origin, but then we develop our own families as we grow. And whether we are related or not, we have this potentiality, the grandmother or the great aunt effect. So personal growth, let's put up some indicators of this. This one really speaks to me at this point in my life. I've done a lot of self-reflection but I'm not ready to kind of put a lid on my potential. And I would invite you to consider the lifespan as utterly dynamic until the final day. With this self-knowledge, because we have experienced lots of different things, how can that inform us going forward? How can we, knowing what we know about ourselves and knowing what works for us and what really doesn't work for us, how can we craft a growth journey, a learning journey that reflects our most authentic self? And now is the time to step into our most authentic self. If there are reasons why we haven't been able to do that, and they may be reasons if we think of the ecosystems, if we think of the layers that we are embedded in, there may have been influences within those layers that didn't allow us to truly be ourselves. but now is the time until that final day. And in that way, we can actually reach our full potential. And, you know, there are weeds. This beautiful sunflower would no doubt have some weeds around it. And we do need to be really proficient, dynamic, continuing gardeners and make sure that the weeds are not stopping us from really rising up and reaching our full potential. And so some ways to do this, I'd invite you to find things you like to do. I've talked before in other webinars about how multisensory we are. And so actually tuning into our multiple senses, we have way more than 5, as I've said before. We can build a multisensory chart of what actually lights us up and what engages our senses. And we can also work out what we need to move away from. What does not engage our senses, that's a very clear message. We can move away from it. Of course, we can find a way to help others. There's lots of research to show that that is incredibly good for well-being, to help someone else. Again, with that proviso though, setting boundaries around that. We don't have to help everyone so much that we don't get to be developing ourselves fully. And we can find a way to make some small impact in this world. And just on that volunteering piece, there are, of course, lots and lots of opportunities. And as we perhaps step away from full-time work or full-time caring of a family, that is an opportunity for us. But to do that incredibly mindfully, to be selective and to only do what feels truly right, because we have already lived a life, many of us women, where we've given a great deal. So self-acceptance, I'm going to put up some indicators there. This is a big one for women, isn't it? I've worked a lot on this in my life and continue to work on it. Acknowledging and accepting every aspect, every element of ourselves, including our wonderful qualities, and then our shadow side, our weaknesses or the flaws that perhaps are things that we struggle with. I think self-acceptance is also about looking at the life journey so far and being okay with what we've done and what we may not have done, decisions we've made or decisions that were taken out of our hands, and we were perhaps not able to fully realise, but being okay with that. So Laura King, I've talked about her a little bit tonight. She has another very interesting avenue of research, which is looking at honouring the loss that we might have experienced so far across the journey. And sometimes this loss might be the things that we haven't actually been able to bring fully to life in our lives. And to move towards them, not push them away, but to move towards them and spend a little bit of time processing them. And then to be able to step forward again and onward. And, you know, great coaching or, if need be, counselling or therapy can help here. And just kind of scaffold that process. If you do feel that there's something that you deeply wanted at this stage in your life, you wanted to have it squared away and organised and it hasn't happened for you, to move through that process again, as I say, by being willing to step towards it and to honour it, and then to be able to let it go and go forward. If you're interested in Laura King's work, I can certainly send you some of that. Self-compassion, it's a beautiful way to do this. I see it as sunshine inside. If we constantly look to the external world to make us feel worthwhile, we're going to be sorely disappointed. We actually need to bring sunshine right inside into our first and most precious home, which is us, our body, our heart. And I would encourage anyone at this midlife point to be regularly engaging in a self-compassion practice, whatever that might be for you. For me, I have a mantra. It's a private mantra, but it means a lot to me. And as I swim, I say it, and I say it many, many times. And in that way, I sculpt that beautiful, loving, self-compassionate phrase into my head and into my heart. Environmental mastery, here's a few examples of that. When we are able to really look at what we have in our environment and then navigate forward, knowing that we can make changes and work with what we have. Again, I use the analogy of the ocean. It's a powerful analogy for me because, you know, within our environment, the waves will keep coming, the tide will come out and it will in and it will wash out again. The tide can bring all kinds of things in with us, but it is about adapting and flexing and changing according to what is available in our environment. And again, let's hope we can do this for as long as possible as we move towards an older age. Connecting with nature is just incredibly important. And it's a beautiful place for solitude as well. These are big concepts tonight, and I would just invite you to find the time to take a solo walk in nature and consider some of these deep concepts, these deep psychological dimensions that are so important for us. And autonomy, 3 indicators there. I make decisions that are right for me. Got to be doing that now. We may not have been able to do this in the past, but now we need to be actively working towards this. Of course, they need to be decisions that we do have within our locus of control. I regulate my behaviour from within. It's about letting go of some external standards that we might have been trying to meet and having our own internal standards of thoughts and actions and feelings and behaviour that are aligned with our values. And, you know, that third one is very similar. Resisting the social pressure to be or do something that just does not feel authentic. And so we are responsible for our own well-being within the locus of our control, of course. And this takes active engagement, practice, conscious awareness. It's an active process and it's slow work. It doesn't happen overnight. We all know that and we can get impatient with it, but it is slow and highly valuable work. We can ask ourselves these questions, and I will send this chart through to you tomorrow if you think this is useful to you. What has worked in the past? What may I need to let go of? Who models this in my life already? Think of that intergenerational piece. There might be someone older in your life who's modeling for you, or perhaps is doing things that you don't want to do, and that's okay too. We can learn from that. What can I experiment with? There's a chart that just sets it out for you, and I will certainly send that out tomorrow. And we have each other. I just want to pause at this moment because I do feel whenever I do a webinar and I know that we have a group of women together, I do feel the energy and the feminine connection, and especially women of different ages, we can learn from one another, and we were not we were never meant to walk the path alone. If we look at Indigenous wisdom and Indigenous women across the world, they walk the path together and they assist and support and nurture and love and care for one another. And we can do the same. And we need to actively be doing this, not competing with each other, not trying to be better than one another, and not socially comparing ourselves all the time, but walking together and nurturing one another. So I'm going to finish on an Indigenous note with Dr. Noel Nannup, beautiful Noongar elder. All we need to do is have a piece of the path to the future, and we shape it and polish it, and we take a step forward, and we do this step by step. This is a real photograph. This was a double rainbow that I was lucky enough to see last week here in beautiful Wadawurrung country. I would really encourage you to think deeply about what we've looked at tonight. I can share resources with you. It is just about taking a step forward in a very heliotropic direction. And so what step forward will you take tomorrow? And I can see we're past time, so we are not going to have time for questions, but I invite you to email me any questions you have, and I will be straight on to them, and I will email you back tomorrow. Here's how you can keep in touch with me. I want to thank you tonight for your beautiful attention, and I do apologise. I have not really even given you a chance to put anything in the chat bar. If you want to do that now, feel free, but you can contact me via my website, via Instagram, via Facebook, via LinkedIn, and via my email, which is at the bottom there. Let me check.